Great.
Fantastic. So third session, we are going to switch platform just a little bit and go over to ConfigMgr, which started to get cloud imaging support earlier this year, and the technical preview that came out in May, and then eventually into the 2006 release, followed by some enhancements in 2009, 2010 TP, and I really hope that all of those improvements will carry over to 2010 current branch, which should be released basically any day now. Still working out some stuff there, but the release of that one is quite imminent or quite close. Now, in terms of cloud imaging through ConfigMgr, it's important to note that this is not, there is always a cost connected to this, because the cloud imaging components in ConfigMgr, they grew through the cloud management gateway. And for the last few years, we've been setting up these for various type of customers across all different type of verticals. That was also been raised this concern, well, is it costly to run a cloud management gateway? And sure, there is a sort of a fee to it, but it turned out that the cost is often way less than organizations think. So what I did earlier this year, I actually reached out through the ConfigMgr community and asked them, all right, what are you actually paying for this? And I contacted a small and medium and large customers that I know was using the CMG, and I actually got their permission after some political work with their management. Technical stuff are always easy, political is always more interesting. But anyway, what we ended up seeing was that even organizations that had a good fair chunk of clients downloading lots of data every month, the cost per device usually ended up being somewhere in between 20 and 40 cents for the most part, where I say the average would probably something around 30%. And this, of course, depends on how much you download through the platform, etc. But from a cost point of view, to be able to manage and deploy machines wherever they are in the world, that's not big money. I mean, think about the time you spend 4 hours doing something and divide that by 30 cents. You can actually deploy quite a number of machines for just that hourly the rate alone. So it's nice to see these additions being tapped into the CMG. And the first sort of what? Yes, sir.
So cloud managing, CMG, all that is awesome. One thing that people seems to miss, and this is kind of important, is that, okay, so we can deploy machines using CMG, we can manage machines using CMG, and then I ask the customers, how does the machine connect back to your domain? Well, they don't. That means you don't really have a complete solution. If the machine is domain joined, then it also needs to talk to your domain. Otherwise, it's going to be a horrible experience. It's going to work. It's just the machine won't get any policies. It won't get security configuration using GPOs and things like that. So as long as you have CMG, you can manage a device. Fine. You also need to make sure that the device can, if it's domain joined, reach back to the domain. Talking to Michael Niehaus a few years ago, he told me that, well, in the long run, there's no point of having the device joining to Active Directory. So try to get away from that as fast as possible. And I agree with him. This is a time where you might need to start thinking of, we still need to have devices. They still need to be managed. You will most likely need ConfigMgr and CMG, but you might consider joining them to Azure AD. It could be easy. It could also be extremely complicated.
Hey, Michael, can I
and
pause you for a minute? I'm not sure who's presenting, but it's not your content. It's just a notepad or WordPad.
It is WordPad. It's not my WordPad. It's Johan's WordPad.
This one is mine that I'm showing right now. Michael is just talking.
Yes, I'm not showing anything.
Oh, okay, there were some comments in our chat that people were confused about what was being shared.
Okay.
So I paused you just to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, right now we're doing a demo of how WordPad works. Michael is talking. Thank you. Yeah, so as long as you have that in mind, maybe Active Directory is not the authority of your machines, or it might not be that in the future. Moving everything out of the office, making them mobile devices for real, means they might need to have another authority than Active Directory. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, for now, the CMG is very tied into the ConfigMgr platform, and it's going to be like that, I expect, for a long time. And what I found the last few years using it is that when it came back in 1802, its imaging capability was basically close to zero. The only thing that you were able to do back then was to so early, the support was run basically in place upgrade sequences. So that was the only supported scenarios, and that even remotely resembles imaging. So you can use that to service machines from one Windows 10 version to the next. Then back in 2006, Microsoft added, and Microsoft called this release the working from home or working from anywhere release of ConfigMgr, but they added in bare metal deployment to it. And they added it in with a twist. And the twist was the following. Basically, if you have an environment where, in this case, you have your local ConfigMgr server and you have your Azure VM here that is running the CMG, or the CMG is a VM in Azure. You don't create it, but Microsoft does it for you when you set up the CMG. That one is taking care of all the content and all the requests from the clients, etc. But when you would do bare metal imaging of, say, this device here, that was not on the local network, that would not work. In the 2006 release of cloud imaging support or bare metal imaging support through the CMG, it had to contact to a local MP first, or at least an MP it could reach first, before it could start and get all the content from the actual cloud management gateway. Now, luckily, and I was super happy about this, in the technical one preview, that requirement to talk to a local friend first is away, because now when you create your media, you can actually say that, no, my management point is going to be the cloud management gateway rather than a local so basically they removed the need, and now it turns into a true imaging platform in terms of how you do deployment. Now, if you go to a conference, it's been a few years now, or a year since I was like a live one at least, but you go to a virtual one and you listen to presentations, and you often hear words like, yeah, setting up CMG is super easy. And if someone asks me how long time it takes to set up a CMG, I usually say, yeah, it's going to take 2 to 3 days. And the thing is, I'm almost always right about it will take that number of days. It's not that the setup itself takes 2 or 3 days, because if everything is just next finish, it's a matter of minutes, and then maybe 10, 15 minutes for the service to actually provision itself. But it could be things like finding someone who has admin rights into Azure AD. It could be finding someone that deals with the certificates that are required, someone to make the decision whether to actually use an internal one or to actually buy a third-party one to use for the client part later on. And for example, one customer I was working with was an airline. They wanted to do a short proof of concept, but they did not want to spin up a PKI platform that will hand out the certificates for the actual clients. And I don't know if you know this, but when you do PKI in ConfigMgr, every single client needs to have a cert that it's issued to that client that has that computer name in the subject. And this customer just, no, we're not going to do that right now. We don't have time for it. So I had to go out and buy client certs in bulk from DigiCert at $10 a piece just to get the project going. Another fact I was running into just a few weeks back, I was setting up CMG for a healthcare organization, and it worked to like 99.9%, but it was always something that stopped working after a little while. And we lost count of the number of hours I spent troubleshooting that one. But what we found eventually, their firewall was using HTTPS inspection, and that firewall did not approve of the certificates that was assigned to the CMG. So it will actually starting to drop stuff eventually. And this has been a nightmare for me recently in a few projects where stuff that is not supposed to interfere with your traffic does it. So you do everything right, but yet it doesn't work. It's so frustrating. But bottom line, the CMG in terms of the requirements has been much easier now in later versions of ConfigMgr, no matter if you are going through enhanced HTTP or if you're going for a pure PKI implementation. Both of them, of course, are supported. So in my lab here, I actually have two CMGs in my environment, one that I'm running in my normal production environment and one that I'm running in the technical preview. And of course, to be able to do the pure cloud imaging, I have to be in the technical preview right now. But other than setting it up and do the configuration, the certs and the applications, of course, you can use the traditional connection analyzer, just making sure everything works, and you can either sign in, or in this case, I'm just going to borrow a certificate that I stole, honestly, loaned, I think is the word, borrowed from one of my clients, just to do the sort of verification that, all right, that seems to be, no, this one is not really happy. Okay, so why is that? Well, apparently some configuration settings has changed, and in this case, you need to go ahead and probably synchronize that configuration to make sure that whatever update or change that was required is done. But after been doing that, here I have my sequences. Just a few bare metal deployment sequences. This is one for.
Can I poke in with one thing?
Yeah.
So enhanced HTTP is awesome. To make it work slick, smooth, and nice, you need to be on 2006, and every client needs to be on 2006 as well.
Yeah, the later
Otherwise,
releases are better. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to be this little nifty thing that says, well, enhanced HTTP doesn't require the client to have a certificate. But when you start reading, it says, well, it still does need to have some kind of authentication token. With a 2006 client, it will get that through ConfigMgr. With prior versions of the client, it can't. Therefore, if you have a prior client than the 2006 version of the SMS agent, then you need to do bulk actions to prepare all the machines. So because I had a customer that they did this, they upgraded to 2006, but they didn't wait for all the clients to get the new agent. It takes a couple of days. So they were going to people and go like, yeah, go away, you can go home, everything is fine, we're running 2006. Nope, didn't work. Bring them back. So for enhanced HTTP to work the way it's supposed to work, meaning seamlessly and easy, make sure that the client is running 2006. If you do PKI, then it doesn't matter. Avoid PKI because that's a nightmare itself. You said 2 to 3 days. Last time I did a PKI solution, we spent 3 weeks. And it was about finding the manager and the administrator for the correct PKI solution because the customer had 4 of them and nobody knows which one was the active one. So it doesn't take many minutes to do it, as you said. The next thing, that's fast, right? It's everything else. You need to have a subscription. You need to have the right subscription. You need to have a global admin access, and you shouldn't have that, so somebody else need to have that. You need to set everything up. You need to have the PKI solution. The clients need to have the certificate, or you need to integrate with Azure AD, and then you need to be able to synchronize that. And you need to verify that, and the device still need a token to be able to authenticate. So there's a lot of testing and validation. And once everything is up and running, I always force my customers to perform a couple of tests. Yes, you should be able to run a script on a remote device. Yes, you should be able to run a custom task sequence. Yes, you should be able to do Windows Update. Yes, you should be able to install applications. Once that is done, and all that takes approximately 2 to 3 weeks. So don't call either Johan and me and say, hey, it's Monday morning. Can we have this set up and running in the afternoon? Well, we can install everything for you. It's not going to work. It's going to take another week or 2 before everything actually works.
So
I'm done.
Yeah, so it usually takes a little bit more time than you expect to get it going and to do the validation and testing. I've been lucky and been able to resolve most of the issues within a few days because I've been doing this for a while, and after a while you kind of learn what works and doesn't. And also the improvement of the logging has been very helpful, where you can see the sort of the VM side of logs directly in the portal in Azure. So that's nice to have that option. But in terms of cloud imaging, in this case, I only have 2 sequences, but we usually use a third one as well, and that is a pre-caching sequence, and that is especially for doing remote in-place upgrades through the CMG, so that driver packages, etc., are available on at least a few machines in that location when you do the upgrades, and that speeds up the process.
We have questions. Questions coming in.
Okay.
And we have a good one. Everyone says that HTTPS is more secure than enhanced HTTP, but I don't necessarily believe that. Well, it depends on how you see it. The point of doing HTTPS is not that it's encrypted, because that doesn't matter. The point of using HTTPS is that it can't be intercepted. That's the point. Everything HTTP can be intercepted, and that's the challenge. That means that
if you
bad
think
guys
of it,
can steal traffic.
A ConfigMgr environment that is running it through PKI, where all the site server and the management point and your boot images, whatever distribution points are using HTTPS, of course, is more secure than an environment that does not. But the flexibility that enhanced HTTP give you often simplifies at least parts like the CMD setup, where you may continue and happily continue to run HTTP locally on your network, but using enhanced HTTP for other type of implementation, for example, the admin service, or in this case, the CMG. So yes, folded PKI is always a bit more secure by design, so to speak. But enhanced HTTP is an easy option for customers running HTTP, but just want to get these configurations set up quickly
and the thing is
and
that
easily.
even if you define it says, well, we're going to use enhanced HTTP, does it mean it's going to use HTTP for everything? No. It's still certificate for authentication between the client and the MP. It's the traffic itself that can be intercepted. So if I ask our security guys, they go like, yeah, you use HTTPS, no questions about it. And it's only about man-in-the-middle attacks.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you want to protect. But we do have another question, Johan, before you continue.
Okay.
It says, does the Config Manager 2006 Plus CMG still require VPN split tunneling to do fully automated task sequences based Windows 10 in-place upgrades. What about wipe and load Windows 10 upgrades and user state backup and restore? I'm going to answer the part of this. Does ConfigMgr 2006 CMG still require VPN split tunneling? It really doesn't matter because you really need to have split tunneling to make sense of a CMG anyway. Otherwise, all the traffic is going to go in and out. That means that patching is you're going to download the patches to your on-prem environment, and then you're going to send it to the client. So it's going to cost you a lot of money, and you need to have a really fat internet connection. So customers that doesn't allow split tunneling often have lots of other issues, regardless if this works or not, because I haven't tried it. So whenever we have customers that are forbidden to use split tunneling, the benefit of using the CMG becomes less because they can just connect to the VPN because they need to do that anyhow. And if you're on VPN, you're already on the network. The purpose of the CMG is to avoid doing VPN connections.
Yeah, or at the very least, not downloading the traffic over VPN, but rather getting it from the CMG itself.
Yeah.
So yeah. There have been some really good articles recently by Microsoft PFEs and some of the MVPs regarding the whole split tunneling type setup that you have to do or may have to do these days to get that network flow the way you want it to. But yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea of VPN is kind of legacy. I know we have a lot of customers using it, and more are abandoning VPN because of Azure AD Join, independent workstations, and shifting to the modern world. Then VPN is usually something they don't need to have anyway. It's tricky when you need to have it, and it's tricky when you're also not allowed to do split tunneling. Then everything becomes a fight to make it work.
Yeah, but it's, for example, when you're running in-place upgrades, and if you want the machine to, even during that process, even during the sequence, you want the machine itself to be able to authenticate and connect back to your on-premise environment to update things like group policy, whatever it needs to update at that point, or get something down. And user-based authentication VPNs, they will simply not work in that type of scenario. You need to have something like a always-on VPN or the vendor equivalent of allowing such a connection to take place, and it just is a little bit messy to deal with. But if you go back to the imaging piece for a while, so here I have my two sequences. I'm using one for bare metal, one for in-place upgrade, and we usually have the third one I mentioned as well to do the pre-caching when pre-caching is needed to speed up process of servicing our devices. So starting in 2009, when you create your media not for Pixie, but for media here, you now have an option to specify an internet-based media. So this would be the equivalent of what Michael talked about before for the PowerShell deployment toolkit, where we use a custom boot image that have instructions to talk to an HTTPS MDT server, basically. And this is the one that allows me to contact directly our cloud management gateway. And during that, when I create that boot image, or USB stick, whatever I prefer. This is where I can specify password, of course, as usual, unknown computer support, and also which particular cloud management gateway I want to use. So I will pick a boot image, I will pick a distribution point for that boot image, a local one, and then the cloud management gateway that I want to use. And then what happens if I go to a VM, I have a VM here, But this particular virtual machine is configured to boot from that media. I created it before. And in the settings, it's just configured to an external network switch. So this VM now cannot actually talk to my ConfigMgr environment. It would be the same scenario as if it was on a home network or an office where there were no connectivity back to your config manager environment. So I'm going to boot this one up. Wait patiently, click next. Screen is gone for attendees, someone says.
Yeah, can you reshare your screen again?
I can certainly do that. Stop showing application.
Now we can't see anything.
No, that's expected.
Yes. And now it says, now viewing Johan R. Remarks screen. I can see your screen.
All right, so people out there, do still having issues seeing the screen? Yes and no would be helpful.
I can see your screen.
All right, well, we'll go for that one for now. So what I have here now, the virtual machine that I was using, booted up, and it's now showing me a sequence that I published or deployed that is available directly from the CMG. Amy just commented here and also said that some people had to refresh on their end to make it work again. So it could have been something with the GoToWebinar platform as well that prevented the screen sharing from showing. But if I open up a log file here, favorite tool, see and trace, and start to pick into the traditional SMSTS log file, you will actually see that it's indeed talking to these non-local roles here directly from my CMG in Azure. So the interesting part is, and I actually wrote a blog post about this a little while ago. So if you search for the Magic Word Cloud on the blog, this is the one that deals with bare metal imaging from ConfigMgr through the CMG, and this shows the demo I just did on the boot media. But on the server side, it's actually quite funny, I thought. If you start to poke around in your storage count in Azure, you will actually find all the ConfigMgr packages there as basically blobs in that particular storage. And during imaging, they will all get their unique HTTPS something link with a token to access that. And that token by default is valid for about 12 hours. So for troubleshooting purposes, I found it very useful sometimes to just go back to the log file that I got and get the link for the file and just open up a regular web browser and paste in the link and just make sure I can actually get the content down from it, because sometimes you simply need to redistribute that content to the CMD distribution point to make it work.
You mean like any other DP when you need to redistribute content from time to time?
It never happened that I never had to redistribute any packets to any DP ever.
Yeah,
the
sorry.
last 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I like peer-to-peer so much, the less DPs involved. But you still need at least one though. It's kind of hard to get away from that requirement. Fun stuff.
True.
Yeah. All right, any other questions coming in?
Nope.
All right. So from a setup point of view here, that was not a CMG, was it? You still need to prep your usual images, and I recommend not dealing with driver packages, but instead go ahead and create legacy applications for drivers, because as we talked about before, when doing deployment over CMG, that's going to be no fun. So with that in mind, if I go back here, where the concept of archiving stuff is not exactly new. So a lot of organizations have been using this for large applications, as we talked about before, just to speed up that process. But for imaging through CMG, this could be the difference between just a minute download or up to maybe even 20 minutes. I've seen in some environments when there is a larger driver package, not just a 510 when I wrote this particular blog post. So the way I recommend to create these driver packages is not by manually clicking around in console, even though that of course works, but to indeed use the driver automation tool that Maurice Daly and Nicola Anderson are maintaining, because that tool now has the option to create archived versions of these packages. And the later versions of this tool is now using the admin service, which you can also run over the CMG. So now you can actually do the pre-caching component over CMG down to the clients without having to have any local connectivity at all in your environment. And that's really helpful. If you've never seen the tool before, I highly recommend that you download it. I think I have it on this particular machine. Yep. So this is like a pre-version or in the middle version, but it does have the functionality that I needed. And I know you, Michael, you were cursing about this tool the other day, not about the tool itself, but how vendors start to support different models for imaging, because the customer you were working with, they have a bit older devices, and you were saying, can't find it. And then I asked, okay, what's the device? Well, it's this and this and this model. And please note that vendors, they will eventually drop support for Windows 10 for specific versions. And it seems to be very different in between vendors and even in between models, where some models will be supported for like 4 or 5 years and others less than that.
Yep.
But this tool is just downright amazing. Allow you to pick a vendor, and sometimes, as we mentioned, you may have to go back to earlier versions to find drivers, because the vendor simply dropped support for, in this case, a G4. That's probably I don't know, 2015-ish. So that's 5 years old, maybe 4. Whereas a G3 is like 6-7 years old, and there might not be drivers available for 2004 for that one. So you may have to go back, and what you often find is that an older driver may work, it's just not tested and it's not guaranteed. And in some scenarios, you have to get rid of drivers to allow the Windows 10 driver to get in and get the content. But here you pick the models that you want to have, you tell it what type of packages they wanted to create in ConfigMgr. And in this case, I'm also specifying that I want a compressed package, because I'm going to use this package for cloud imaging. And I either pick the zip format that we talked about, or the WIM format. I do not recommend 7-zip, even though it gives you better compression per se, because that kind of breaks the peer-to-peer efficiency if you're using that. And it also breaks data deduplication efficiency, both on distribution points, but also on the client side. So I actually spent an entire weekend testing that. My wife were thrilled that I spent the entire weekend doing that. Not really, but anyhow, I put it up on our blog. If I can find our blog, I'll be happy to show it to you. This one here, where I simply borrowed a lot of different hardware or models from everything from 6-7-year-old machines to almost brand new machines. But I picked 20 models from HP, and I created packages in ConfigMgr for these different type of archiving formats. That took me a while with PowerShell, but eventually got that going. And then I started to test how much data was actually the packet we're using, how much was actually transferred over the network, and how much it ended up using in terms of disk on the client. Because when we do cloud imaging, guess what you're paying for? You're paying for download of network, the data. And these days with SSD drives, we'd often have too much disk available on clients. So you want to make sure that the packages at least doesn't use more than they need to. So in this case, where sure, 7-zip was like the shiny one on the storage on DP, it was actually more data being downloaded over the network compared to using a less effective or less aggressive deployment type. And the Vim format here was even down under 9 gigs. And that was with the fast compression level and down to 8.3. Now, the interesting part becomes when, okay, so you have a package that is out there, it's in somebody's cache. What if there is an update to that package? What we then found is that the winner, when it came to dealing with just updates, it's actually the Vim format, because it kind of just adds stuff to it. So a lot of the core package structure in it is actually retained, whereas a heavily compressed zip file will basically replace the entire file. There will be no effectiveness at all. And 7-zip coming to a close second there. But bottom line, by doing a little bit of archiving of content and using helpful tools like this one from Maurice and Nikolai, it really simplifies the way you do cloud imaging and speeds up the process. Let's see, there was a comment about the tool, just a reflection, I guess. The driver automation tool is great. You make sure that you allow the URLs if you have a firewall that is preventing that tool from downloading. I'm assuming it's all the catalog files that the tool needs from HP, Lenovo, Dell, and Microsoft. So yeah, that's correct. And that same thing goes for actually the whole CMG implementation as well. Of course, the firewall port needs to be open and available for that as well. Another question is, have you tried relying on Windows Update for drivers and then just adding them in as required? Yes, I do. I've also managed to hammer myself on the thumb many times with a hammer, and I didn't like that either. So I'm not the biggest fan of Windows Update for drivers. I'm a more control freak again in terms of that. Statistically, though, it's quite interesting because Microsoft, believe it or not, they getting a lot of telemetry from all their customers around the globe. And what they found statistically, your machines are more reliable in general if you allow them to be at least every now and then updated with newer drivers. It just statistically you get fewer crashes down the road. But I prefer to use tools like this even for updates, because this tool can do updates as well. I can even use this tool to retrieve packages as part of my servicing. So the models that actually need a new driver package when I'm going from, say, Windows 10 1909 up to 20H2 now, when it starts to be a little bit more mainstream, or maybe I'm going from 1809 up to 1909 or something like that. I can just have that tool pick that driver package and use it. So I do prefer to spend a little bit more time up front, and yeah, that's just my take on it. So not Windows Update. I'm not anything from you, Michael, there.
I actually do agree what you're saying, which is kind of weird. I usually don't, but in this case, I do.
Good thing we have this recorded, because I can use this against you later. You know.
I know. One thing that I've seen is when you use this tool, it sometimes flips back. It changes the settings, and So the next time you fire it up, you go back. So if you can go to make and model selection.
I should be able to click that tab. Yes, I've done
so what I've seen a couple of times, not many times, but sometimes, the deployment platform right now is ConfigMgr standard packages, which is what you selected, which is correct in this case, absolutely. But if you're using, if you change that to you're using standard package, if you drop down the list, I've seen this flipping back to driver packages.
Okay. I have not. Maybe I've been lucky, but that's a good to know.
Could be, and uninstall the previous version, install the new version, or I installed another version in another folder. I don't know. I think it's behavior from the customer, and they asked me, why is suddenly every driver package driver imported into the ConfigMgr database? And I was like, well, you selected that. No, I didn't. And then we go in here and go like, yeah, you did. No, I didn't change that. Somebody did, but I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah.
At least two that I can't remember. But
Any
I think
files usually do not change their configuration.
no, but it could be that they removed the application, installed it in another folder, had multiple installation at the same time. I don't know. So whatever I use this, I always check that the deployment platform is the correct one before hitting start, download, and install and inject everything.
Yeah,
it's just a good tip.
Yeah, so this tool is absolutely excellent to drivers for cloud imaging. The tool can also do BIOS updates, so you can do them all in one go. However, to do BIOS updates for people that are working from home, I tend to find a little bit more riskier than just pushing out a new sequence with a version of Windows. So driver packets, I don't mind including those, but BIOS updates is always a bit more interesting if you need to troubleshoot something there. I mean, sometimes it's required, I get that, but not so often. And especially these times, it tends to see that the BIOS updates is the one that, all right, we have to wait for them just a little bit and just make sure everything else working right now. But the tool is remarkably good in dealing with those BIOS updates, creating those packages for you and the script that picks them and adds them during imaging. All right. Any other questions coming in? Now is your chance.
Driver automation tool, and it's switching to driver packages. Can we please open an issue for that, Michael? We'll look into that. Yeah, I think it is a user issue, but I don't know.
Could that possibly be Maurice and Nikolai that posted that question?
Absolutely. And if it is, I expect it to be a user issue. The challenge is that I've seen it at least twice. I think I've seen it 3 times. And if I ask the customers, did you uninstall or did you install, or they go like, no, we haven't changed it. So if it's an init file and it's either moved or something like that, poke around in that. See what happens if you uninstall, install, and something like that, because I think that's the case. And if that's the case, then maybe writing to a registry value to define where the application is or something like that could solve the problem.
There was another follow-up comment with applications for Lenovo's seem to be an issue currently with the tool. I haven't tested that recently, and I know that the application packages were a fairly recent addition to the tool, but Maurice and Nicholas have been quite remarkable in when the vendors do changes on their end, like changing their catalog or messing up their catalog, which happens more than once, they contact them and it get it fixed eventually. And this is what I love about the ConfigMgr community. So many people providing feedback and help. It's just remarkable.
And there's a couple of more questions. BIOS updates account for BIOS passwords. Yes, you can solve that by putting that in the in the application that actually does the BIOS update, because you need to have a script that does it, who owns the driver automation tool and how it's licensed. It's Morris. Morris owns the tool.
I bet it's MIT license.
But I think it's an MIT license, yes.
Let me. I never remember their new websites. I always go to the old one first, and it will redirect me to the new one.
Yeah, me too.
Here we go.
MS Endpoint.
So msendpointmanager.com. Let's see where the GitHub link is. Here we go. So this is the MIT license for it. Open source, obviously, and the MIT license is fairly flexible in what you're allowed to use it for.
Yeah.
I think like the only restriction is you cannot sell it and claim it was yours, or something like that. But that's kind of the obvious
question. How does Michael feel about using folders with spaces in their names? I hate that, but it works. I sincerely think that spaces in names and using a localized language is a user thing. Right now, I'm migrating a file server from a 2003 to 2019. So far, we spent about a month poking around in user garbage with folder names like I need to go shopping on Thursday before, otherwise my husband will be blah, 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 blah. The name of the folder is an entire novel. It's like, why do you do that? I know that Word used to default to that. So yeah, I don't like that.
So more questions. BIOS updates, password, yes, to answer that one. Test archive drivers on on-premise SCCM. Let me see, can we do? Yeah, okay, so the question is, can we test archive drivers, meaning set file WIM files on on-premise ConfigMgr? Absolutely, and they will speed up even local deployment because it's just not as much, but the download size is like half, and even more if you're using peer-to-peer. So just the core downloaded file is going to go faster even for an on-premise environment, but it's usually, we're talking about maybe going from like 3 minutes down to 1 on an on-premise environment for the driver step, whereas the cloud management gateway environment, we can be up to like 20 minutes down to 1 or 2 minutes using the same technology. So definitely, and we have customers that just did the flip so that they always have the same driver package, no matter if they deploy a machine that is on-premise versus they deploy a machine that is using the CMG for imaging. So yeah, so absolutely.
There's a great question here. Does your fix for Lenovo's weird non-standard model name still work with PSD? So no, it doesn't. But we are both working on two different solutions. Number one, we're going to build in the model alias and make alias into PSD. We haven't done it yet, but we're working on it. Well,
so for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a platform, it's a script that normalizes model names. If you ever stumble across a model name that just looks downright weird, we can convert that into names that makes more sense.
But we're also working on another thing, and since Morris is on the call, he's going to be slightly happy. We want the PSD solution to work seamlessly with PSD. Currently it does, but I know that Morris and Nikolai is using the vendor's motherboard identification number. So we're going to add the motherboard identification number as a variable within the gather process for PSD, which means that you can either use make and model, or you can use make alias and model alias, or any combination of that. But you will also be able to use the motherboard identification number as an identifier for the driver packages. So yeah, we're working on it.
So drive automation tool, more questions. Can you use it without the admin web service? Yes, the older versions, yes, can use as the regular web service. You need to have something that gets the packages from ConfigMgr. It's either going to be the traditional web service. It's been around for years, but it's no longer. So the driver automation tool is no longer being enhanced for that particular component. The way going forward is to use the admin service in ConfigMgr. So version 4. Whatever of the driver automation tool is now using that one. And that one works, as I mentioned before, both on premise, but also over CMG. And that is actually now logic in the invoke CMAP script that detects whether the machine is internal or external and automatically figures out where to grab the content. The only thing you need to worry about is permissions, making sure that the admin web service is set up for that environment. So what else? What do you see as the best option for imaging dropship PCs directly to users working from home? So dropship, I'm assuming they were being deployed somewhere else and just put them let's see here. Okay, to basically get the deployment going, I understand that question as, and that would basically come back to what we were talking about in the very first session of the day, where, not that one, but this one here, where you, if you need to image a machine at home for whatever reason, you need to find out somewhere to initiate that connection, and it can be anything from the old school USB sticks to booting from BIOS, booting from phone even now, or Pixie of internet. So one way or another, you need to get the deployment going. And of course, you can send them a complete standalone media. We actually have some organizations doing that as well. Even managed services I've seen using like a thick standalone media, sending it out. And I just try to avoid having to send out either hardware or routers or USB sticks if I can avoid it, and just ship the machine and make sure it can be imaged wherever it is. Can you say something about dynamic apply soft packs from HP? I mean, the technology has been there for a long time. I just haven't worked with it in a quite long time. I've been a driver control freak for a good decade now, I think. So I prefer.
I can say something about that.
Okay.
In pre-configured environment, meaning everything is cool, dandy, and everything is working, then I use the same method. In disaster recovery solution and incidents, we are using software from the vendor to make sure the device is fine. Because there's almost no way to. I'm working right now with a customer, and so far we have 150 gigabyte of drivers. It's insane. So we rather have something that works than spend hours, days validating drivers. I can't validate the drivers. I don't have the device here. So it really depends on how you see it. And if you are going to download the driver packs directly from the vendor without testing and checking them, then you might as well just download them and install them. The only purpose of pre-downloading the tool, the drivers, is that you have the chance to test and validate that the drivers are actually okay. But if you're not going to do that, then you might as well just download them. It's the same story as Windows Update. We have customers saying, well, we use WSUS. Okay, how do you do that? We automatically approve everything and deploy it. Okay, in that case, you can use Windows Update for Business. No, we can't do that. We need to control it. Well, you don't. You have a rule that says automatically approve everything and just deploy it. And if you don't have any waves or checks or validations, then it doesn't matter. So it's the same thing with drivers. If you're not going to test it anyway, then it doesn't matter. Then you can just download it directly from the vendor.
All right. Follow-up question was, not now, a new question was, can we talk about the reset OS feature in Windows 10, if it will be possible to preserve drivers or update them as part of that process? I actually don't No.
As far as I know, Niehaus told me that, or Michael Niehaus told me that if you do a reset operating system, applications that are not persistent will go away. Packages that are not persistent will go away, but drivers doesn't. They stay.
So they preserved, but they do not update. All right, so that will be something I have to initiate after the reset has been done then.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Any more questions?
Yes.
Coming in, I've been told. Okay, since we're talking about drivers and in-place upgrade, will an in-place upgrade sequence in ConfigMgr automatically use drivers stored in the OSD upgrade stage content task? And I'm assuming that's the task that is, or variable that is here. Let me bring up that. Improving here. That's the action. Yeah. If you have drivers in this variable being set and they are available in that location, it will use it. The only thing I recommend if using that one, put a condition on it. So it actually only provides the variable if there actually are any drivers in that folder, if that folder actually exists. So there is any content. I'm not the biggest fan of the way the default sequence have its way to dealing with driver content packages, because you can't really have a condition here. In that case, you would have to have a condition on the entire step, and I don't want that. So you don't want it to fail just because this particular model didn't need any drivers during the upgrade, but this one can definitely be used to set the content. You can also just use the whatever the switch is. There is another way to specify the driver path as well, but this one works well. Yeah, this is the other one, the old way of doing things. And then you specify the switch with the install driver switch. So that one still works as well. Just that this one was more convenient, I thought, when I was documenting this back in the days. We are still in an environment where we use USB media through MDT, and driver packages are, well, a large part of that media. Started to use David Segura's driver packages. That is basically more optimized in terms of storage, and they're now down to 1.8 gig package, which is pretty downright amazing. That reduction, going from 40 gigs down to, well, just short about 2. That's pretty good. Any chance of some integration? Well, haven't thought of it, but it sounds like a pretty shiny idea. So me and Michael will certainly talk about it if we can do something around that process. I was actually in David's session when he presented that at the, has to be one of the FWSMUG sessions, or
using an environment, using USB media through MDT.
it's just that they're using his mechanism for shortening down the driver package size and using like more generic type driver. Yeah, let's talk about that one offline. It might be doable. So basically, PSD support for David's hack. That's what the request is.
Well, the question would be, my question would be, why, if there's no network, I do understand why you have a
no, it's a standalone media. They're using full standalone media with everything on it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then, yeah, if you have a lot of models, it can be fairly big.
Yes.
I'll come back to that one. Thank you. With cloud imaging, where are users likely, well, users are likely working from home. How can you account for personal Wi-Fi connections to minimize user input. Windows PE and Wi-Fi is not the best of friends. I have seen some posts from Brooks Pepin. He works for VMware. He's done some work around it. I know Oliver Kieselblack, he even wrote a little tool that can help simplify getting Wi-Fi going. But all of them have their little caveats and how they work and how you get the profiles to them, etc. So right now it's much easier to just provide a wired connection for the computer if you need to do deployment at home. And that, as I showed before, that wired connection can even be USB stick using the generic RNDIS driver in WinPE, which is the same for all type of hardware using it. But for Wi-Fi, it's only going to be like, might be difficult to do without having some sort of device that converts that into something that makes sense, like a phone or like you mentioned, Michael, they were using a little device to basically bridge Wi-Fi over to Ethernet.
This question is awesome. I want to answer this. You can answer it too, but I want, the one. I want to use MDT and basically set it as a service. I think that's a great idea to start with, right? That's a great idea. At what point is it moving from MDT to CCM? There's no size. That's the funny thing. MDT is about one thing. That is about deploying the operating system. Configuration Manager is about lifecycle management, and that includes deployment. So the question is, are you going to use something else to manage the devices? So you can say, well, we're going to use Active Directory to manage devices. Okay. We're going to use a third-party tool to do that. Okay. We're going to use an MDM solution to do so. Okay. We're going to use Intune to do it. Okay. Neither of them have anything to do with operating system deployment. So the smallest customer I have using ConfigMgr have 16 users. The largest MDT customer I ever talked to have more than 35,000 devices. It's all about
and then you have the mix in between where you have an organization for whatever reason still using MDT just to get the core image down, and then in the end it's either like I did demoed earlier, be brought into Intune automatically, or they install the ConfigMgr agent and continue to manage the machine through ConfigMgr or whatever the solution they're using for management. So
and how big must the company be to have a deployment solution? That could depend. If the company they are buying a device, and if the device breaks, they throw it away or send it back to the vendor, and they get a new device. It's like a cell phone. Then they will never need a deployment solution. I haven't seen many deployment solutions for iPhones, because if it breaks, you get another device. In that case, Autopilot Intune is kind of the perfect place. But as long as you want to be able to install the operating system, control the operating system from the beginning, make it more ready for the user, meaning that you install all the application, then you're going to need a deployment solution. So most companies that exist today need a deployment solution because the way they are installing applications and configurations. In the future, that might change. I know talking with Michael Niehaus, who said that the flow is supposed to be like you order a device, then you ship the device, and then you power on device, and then you log on, and then you start working. And the assumption is that that device won't break. And if it does, you send it back, and then you get another device. So it depends on the philosophy at the company. How are we treating devices? Is it going to be treated as a cell phone, or is it going to be treated as a traditional computer?
In this case also, they wanted to, the question was around, we want to sell it as a service. And when I hear that word, I'm assuming, all right, they also want to take care of the machine after it has been deployed, and then it falls into management, and then you need a management suite. to some extent the Intune ConfigMgr wherever you choose. So
yeah. So having selling like PSD in the cloud deployment solution for all the customers that you're having, yeah, that's going to work. And then different customers can choose different approaches to managing the device. One customer might choose config manager. Okay, so that's going to work. Another customer might say, well, we have a guy called John. He's our management solution. He runs around. Okay, that's going to work too. Or another customer says, no, we want to do everything in Intune. Okay, that's going to work too.
And to make that even complex now where you start to see functionality being added in Intune that will remotely control what the ConfigMgr agent is doing on premise. That's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Did we get a web console? Yeah, yes, you did.
True.
Yeah. All right, any more questions? And there will be no singing and dancing. I just say that up front.
No singing and dancing? What do you mean?
There will be no singing and dancing.
Okay.
All right, then if there are no more questions, we have actually gone through all the content that we wanted to introduce to you guys today. There will be a recording available, usually within 24 hours, as soon as we can get it up and rendered out and put up into YouTube, because we can't have it on the platform because the restriction on number of users that is allowed. And with that, it allows me to say thank you so much for attending this webinar. And thank you, Michael. Thank you, Amy. And thank you to all our sponsors that has been helping us getting this event going. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Twitter, LinkedIn, website, you name it, and we'll be happy to help. So, any final words, Mike, Amy?
Final words? Yeah. Try to get away from Active Directory, focus on Azure AD if possible, and make sure that you have a cloud solution when your company is going to be hit by ransomware.
All right.
That's depressing, but it's true.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have an amazing rest of the week, and hope to see you in the next user group in a hopefully near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.